Hey guys, Will here, and welcome back to the fourth and final instalment of the narrative backstory for our Reclamation of Phloorvex narrative campaign. If you haven't seen the previous three bits of backstory and the missions that go with them, then I'd strongly encourage you to go back and watch those, because that's going to help this make a lot more sense, particularly the last battle, which this directly leads on from. So without further ado, here's what's going on. War Boss Crazy Wheels was dead, his bike a burning pile of scrap. After the salamanders killed his squad and left him broken on the field of battle, his bike exploded as charges that someone had planted in the fuel tank detonated and put an end to any chance of him usurping Kogzag. As Epistolary Nouvoin's armoured column pushed north, he had been faced with heavy resistance, both from the Cult of Speed and the Genestealer ambush, but their determination, resilience and firepower had allowed them to overcome and push onwards. The discovery that not all of High Fleet Kraken had been wiped out by the Orks had given their mission extra urgency. Where there were Genestealers, other, larger Tyranids were sure to be on their way, and the old librarian knew that they would need to defeat the Orks before the High Fleet arrived in force if they were going to be able to mount any kind of credible defence. Stopping only long enough for his tech marine to investigate and neutralise the source of the plasma anomaly, the salamanders advanced inexorably towards where their sensors showed the Orks were mustering. Back at the former Mechanicum research facility that was rapidly transforming into an Ork mech's workshop, things were going exactly as Kogzag had planned. His rival's attempt to challenge his leadership had served only to delay the Space Marines, buying him time to work on his project and build up his forces. Once Crazy Wheels had served his purpose, it was a simple matter for Kogzag to dispose of him. Kogzag's research was also making progress. His latest experimentations were yielding results, and soon he would be able to power up a small-scale version of his warp drive controller. This could spell disaster for the planet. If the contraption were to fail, it could open a warp rift, and the foul demons of the Chaos Gods could swarm through in vast numbers. Worse still, it could actually work, resulting in an Ork warband finally able to control their own path through the galaxy, wreaking havoc across Imperial space. Faced with the combined threat of an imminent Tyranid invasion and a growing Ork war, Nouvoin had to act quickly and decisively. His plan was simple: attack the Orks in their stronghold before they could muster their own attack, face them eye to eye, put them to the flame, kill their leaders, destroy their war machines, and demolish their smoke-belching factories. He ordered all surviving Imperial forces to stage a coordinated all-out attack on the Ork position. Third Company were to use the mobility of their transports to encircle the Ork base, while forces from the armoury provided fire support, destroying key Ork targets. First Company would then launch an orbital strike in drop pods and by teleportation to crush the Orks in their stronghold. The Salamander's strength would be further bolstered by nothing less than an Imperial Knight-class Titan, Sir Frederick of House Cadmus. A recent arrival to the war, Sir Frederick had been dispatched by his noble household in response to the Tyranid invasion to provide support for Mechanicum interests on Phloorvex. But, on seeing the situation, he vowed to add his strength and firepower to the Space Marines' cause. As the Salamanders launched their assault, they saw the Orks had some sort of previously unknown device that Nouvoin could sense was connected to the warp. Kogzag had already fired up a small-scale version of his warp drive controller, and Ork reinforcements were starting to arrive from across Phloorvex via its portal. But that wasn't all the device had done. The field, stabilising the device, was not fully shielding it from the warp's influence, and the ferocity of the battle on Phloorvex had caught the attention of Khorne, the god of war and bloodshed. The Blood God had offered Kogzag an alliance, and although he was uneasy with the un-orky nature of the powers that had contacted him, he could not deny their fightiness and the asset they could be to his war. The mech was blissfully unaware that dealing with creatures of the warp never results in a fair bargain, and would likely cost him more than he could gain from it in the long run. As the battle went on, Nuvuan could see how much of a threat the Ork reinforcements and their chaotic allies could be, and he knew that to have any hope of a lasting victory on Phloorvex, the Space Marines had to not only kill the Orks in the area, but also gain control of the warp device and shut it down. Okay, so that's the situation. Now here's how the game's going to work. It's going to be 3,000 points per side, and we're going to play this on the double-sized board at 40k Gaming, so it's going to be an 8-foot by 6-foot board. So we're looking sort of all-out apocalypse scale here. The Orks are going to deploy first in the centre of the board, along with their demonic allies, and they're going to get to basically set up fortifications on the board, not sort of like actual fortifications that you pay points for, but just sort of set the scenery up to represent an Ork defensive position. Then the Orks are going to be deploying first in the centre, and also placing one objective right in the centre that's going to represent the warp device, and then 3 power generators within their deployment zone as well, spaced at least 12 inches apart. These are going to be objectives and be worth 3 points each. First turn's going to go to the Space Marines, and they can move on from any table edge. So they all start off the board and come in from the table edges to represent them surrounding the Ork base. And also they're going to be allowed to have deep strike reserves arrive from turn 1, not just drop pods, but other things teleporting and jump packing down as well, again to represent the sort of the lightning assault that the Space Marines are launching. As for victory points, it's going to be 3 points for killing any HQ unit or Lord of War choice, because at this size of mission we could well see Lords of War on both sides. 2 points for elites, fast attacks and heavy supports, and then 1 kill point for killing troops choices or dedicated transports for troops choices. Other dedicated transports will count to the cost of whatever section they're brought, so an elite dedicated transport is going to be worth 2 points, etc. That's the basis of point scoring, and it's going to be normal random game length, and so between 5 and 7 turns. Now, as for this warp device in the centre, as well as the power generators for it being objectives, it's also going to allow the Orks to summon on reserves. Essentially, at the start of any turn from the second onwards, at the start of the Ork turn, the Ork player can choose to roll a d6, and I've generated a table of possible outcomes. Basically, if the total is between 1 and 4, instead of summoning Ork reserves, the Orks are going to instead have accidentally summoned Demons of Khorne. Now, unlike the Demons of Khorne that are going to be taken as allies to the Orks, these are going to be unaligned, so they will just attack the nearest target, and they're going to scatter 3d6 from the portal, and can't charge on the first turn, but then they're probably going to charge into combat and mess stuff up. If they Orks get 5 or higher, and with the modifiers this could feasibly go up to 9, then they're going to summon Ork reinforcements instead, and these will come on from 6 inches from the portal, again as if they'd arrived from reserves. And the higher the score, the better it is. So for, say, a 5 on the table, the Orks are only going to get like 10 boys. Up to 9, they could actually bring on Gorkanaut. So some serious potential reinforcements for the Orks, but I think this should balance nicely with the fact that the Space Marines are getting 3,000 points of potential alpha strike, and I will be bringing 3 drop pods, so that's going to mess the Orks up from turn 1, but then hopefully their reinforcements should allow them to come back. So for the modifiers for the table, basically if there's a mech in contact with the controls for the warp device, Orks get to add +1. If there's a big mech instead, it's +2. And if the big mech in contact is Cogzag, it will instead be +3. And then also each of the power generator objectives that the Orks hold will grant them +1. So that's the mission. It's a bit complicated. I'm hoping it's going to work out well and give a really nice cinematic feel of the Space Marines charging in from all angles, trying to blow up this Ork facility, and the Orks responding by summoning on reserves, but with the potential that some of what comes on might not actually be allied to the Orks, but instead be demons. So I hope you're going to like this mission, and tune in for the next video to see how it went down.